So usually I come out and I give like this really heavy talk and everybody's gonna be like in the doomsday mode. I did that in a breakout session this morning, so guess what? I'm gonna talk about something completely different, although I don't have a swear jar up here for every time I say the word communism, which is the worst dirty word in the history of mankind, but I need one because I'm gonna say it a few times. But we already talked about communism in the breakout, and I actually wanted to talk to you guys about something a little bit different. I do have to start by mentioning communists, because as you know, since many of you have listened to me for a long time, there's an old saying that fits with communists, that is, communists share your vocabulary, but they do not use your dictionary. So you're used to this idea that they use words differently than you do, or normal people do in general. And of course, they do this to normal sounding words that, you know, no smart person would pause and say, well, what do you mean by diversity? Everybody knows what that means, right? And you think I'm about to go through the diversity, equity, and inclusion shtick, but I'm actually gonna give you a couple of different words, 3 different words that are more to the moment, like brat, right? She's so brat. She's so brat. Isn't that fun? She's so brat. What does that mean? I'm not going to do this whole shtick about words at length, but what that means is she doesn't take any instructions from anybody that's going to tell her how she has to do things. She's so brat. She's like a bratty teenage girl who's not listening to dad, who's totally separate from, you know, whatever person she was tethered to as vice president, maybe. She's so brat. And everything right now is so demure. You've seen demure? It's so demure. What does that even mean? Well, here's one of the purposes of using the word demure, but it's not the main purpose, is to make you ask, what in the hell are they talking about? Why? How do I answer that? What are they saying? You might know what the word means. You might have to type it into the Google and check. It means modest. It's obviously not true, but how do you even come back to it? Well, they want you wasting your time trying to figure out how to answer something that doesn't mean anything to them. But what it signifies is exactly what they accidentally let slip. Was that at the DNC where they said we have to behave for about 70 more days and then we can go crazy? So they're so demure for 70 more days. They're rubbing it in your face. They're mocking you because you know they're not. We all know they're not. We've seen Pride for the last 4 or 5 years. We know they're not demure. So they're using this word as a code that says we're going to play nice until we win this election. And then let me just tell you, the gates of hell are opening. But these aren't the words I want to talk about. That was the warm-up act. I want to talk about joy, because this is a Joyful Warrior Summit, and you are the Joyful Warriors. But we are being subjected to relentless joy, Kamala mania, the second biggest psyops maybe since COVID. Joy. Guess what? They have a different meaning, the word joy, than the one you're more familiar with. You know what joy is, but we're going to spend most of the time talking about what joy really is and where it really comes from. But let's talk about them, because there's a concept called radical joy, because of course there is. And radical joy is rooted in something called critical hope. And you think, critical? There's that word that keeps coming up. Critical theory, critical race, critical analysis. We have to do a critical analysis of ROI, right? So Madam Vice President was recently interviewed. You know, how are all these programs that you're talking about going to pay for themselves? She said, return on investment. Well, return on investment. And then the other time there's going to be some return on investment. And then basically it's the return on investment. And then it's going to be the return on investment. And the reporter kind of pushes just a little bit. And she says, well, we have to have a critical reevaluation of what return on investment is measured. In other words, we're going to use critical theory to redefine return on investment, so that it means advancing socialism or communism, as opposed to actually getting return on investment. They're getting activist bang for their bucks. And it turns out that this critical return on investment is kind of the same as critical hope and the radical or critical joy that grows out of it. Because radical joy is a synthetic joy. In fact, I would say it's a religious mania. A religious ecstasy. You've seen like whirling dervishes. You've seen people that are caught up in the passions of whatever religious ritual that they're in. They're waving their hands. They're having, you know, a very good time, I'm certain. It's that. It is a religious vision where they believe they can see the unburdened future. They can see what can be unburdened by what has been, and they're reveling in the ecstasy of the arrival of the ideal world. It is the joy of transformation, which means the transformation of our system that we have, our liberties, into the system that they want, which begins with a tyranny. It's the critical hope that critical theory will work, or that communism will work this time. That's the root of critical joy. But there's actually this really interesting passage that I never thought too much about until they decided to make joy the buzzword of the next 70 days. And I guess I could strike a Tim Waltz pose to show you what joy looks like. Actually, I'm too straight for that. Can't even do it. I can't do it. Not gonna do it. You're gonna make me lose my train of thought. But there's this interesting sentence I came across when I was, as you all know, I have to mention Herbert Marcuse, the great neo-Marxist of the 20th century, because we live in Herbert Marcuse's world. An essay on liberation in 1969, he has this really weird little sentence tucked in there, and he says that what he's talking about, what he's angling toward, is the anger, the hatred, the joy of the rebellious victim who is defining himself absent the definitions of the masters. That's radical joy. It is anger, hatred, and rebellious victims claiming self-definition. And of course, with the trans issue in front of us, we see what they mean by self-definition. It's a self-definition where your imagination precedes reality. If you can dream it, you can be it. And anybody who tells you you can't is a bigot. It's the joy of destroying the world that we have so that we can have a new one that's defined by limitless possibilities. They call that liberation or freedom, or sometimes even libertarianism, believe it or not. This is the radical joy. So it's rooted in this critical hope, which again is, here's what critical theory is. Critical theory was defined, I guess I did this earlier, I wasn't going to do this many definitions, but critical theory was defined by Max Horkheimer, who developed it. And he said that it was defined specifically because we cannot describe an ideal world on the terms of the existing society. It's not possible, he said. But what we can do is criticize those aspects of the existing society that we wish to change. So critical theory is literally not being able to see what can be, but just trying to get there by unburdening us from what has been. No idea what the future world's supposed to look like, just what it's not supposed to look like. So it's this crazy, critical theory is this crazy idea that if we complain and tear down and destroy and teach our children to destroy enough, that somehow a perfect and functioning society will come out of this. And critical hope is the wild-eyed, blind faith that this will work. That the utopia lies on the other side of relentless, destructive complaining, relentless division, tearing apart communities, families, brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers, everything, children from their parents, that this will somehow build not just a good society, but an ideal society. That's critical hope, and that's one of the roots of radical joy, is the wild-eyed belief that this obvious lie is true. There are other roots that are darker. If we read Marcuse in Eros and Civilization, his book from 1955, which is all about the erotic powers involved, we find other drives that bring radical joy. We heard from Marcuse already, anger, hatred. Those are there. It turns out that Audre Lorde, who's kind of one of the godmothers of critical race theory, articulated that anger and joy are both rooted in the same erotic impulse, the same desire for gratification, the same catharsis. And she got that out of Marcuse. And what Marcuse says, in fact, is that when we use words like joy and enjoyment, we should understand that they mean what Nietzsche meant by them, which is lust and gratification. So it's the joy of temporary satisfaction, which is often the satisfaction of harming your enemies. As a matter of fact, there's a term that's sometimes used that I think is one of the most profound roots of radical joy, which is called libido dominandi, the lust to dominate. Does that not feel exactly like what we've had to suffer? Does that not feel what the word demur is doing to us? And in fact, it goes deeper than that. It's also the lust to humiliate, to embarrass you, to associate you with something bad, to drag the details of your personal life into the mass media as though they're characteristic of your character, to slander. I think y'all are called something with casseroles, moms for fascism, all this kind of stuff. You got all kinds of cool nicknames now. And they even try to steal the joyful warrior thing from you. And what this is the desire to dominate and humiliate. And I think that actually much of the radical joy that we see on display under the brand name of joy is in fact the thrill of destruction and the thrill of dominating and humiliating the people that they externalize all of the bad parts of their lives onto. They're not happy, so it must be your fault. So they blame you, and they dominate you and humiliate you and destroy everything that you've built. And that's joy. That's gratification. And that's the joy, I think, that we're being sold in the guise of a very folksy Midwestern man who just so happened to buy and hand out copies of Little Red Book while he was in China during like Tiananmen Square, and no possible connection of Tim Waltz to the CCP or anything like that. This is the joy. This is a synthetic joy. This is a false joy. This is an empty joy. This is hatred masquerading as joy. It's the enthusiasm, the wild enthusiasm, literally, as I said, of becoming unburdened from a life that they think is beneath them, that you are forcing them into by virtue of the fact that you are not supporting the building of socialism. Everything could be better. Everything could be paid for if we just taxed the rich and then maybe expand the definition of rich to everybody but them. Exactly like happened in Soviet Union, exactly like happened in Mao's China, exactly like happened in Cuba, exactly like is happening in Venezuela, exactly like has happened in every communist regime in history. And that radical joy is poison. And we see that it's poison. We feel the vibes, the vibes, right? There's the vibes. You can feel the saccharine, toxic nature that it's a put on, that it's a show. So where's real joy come from? Since we're joyful warriors, we don't reflect a lot on that. I'm going to tell you that I've thought about this far hard. I usually just kind of walk on stage and just say stuff. And like, people are saying, you don't have to believe me, just ask. You've ever asked me, James, what are you going to talk about today? Like, well, excuse me, oh, we'll see. I don't know. I haven't quite figured it out yet. 5 minutes till it's time to go. I don't know. We'll put it together. But I thought about this, and I've really come down to two sources. Joy's hard, okay? It's hard to be joyful. You're never going to be joyful all the time. Joy is tough, right? And it's not meant to be a state that you linger in like a weirdo, just kind of with a weird smile on your face all the time. You guys didn't know it, but in my head, that's a UN joke. That's a long podcast. There's a couple of them. You can go listen to my podcast about the UN. You'll know what I'm talking about. And the two sources of joy, three maybe, I guess, three. The three sources of joy seem to be the dignity of work, love, and gratitude. And it's that simple. There's tremendous dignity in work. But what kind of work? Frivolous work? You're drawing your anime characters and you spend 6 hours a day drawing your anime characters. You're not really an animator. Nobody buys it. It's not like you work for somebody that's doing it. No, it's not that. It's just your hobby. No, not that kind of work. Or you're in communist China, as I one time saw, and the foreman's coming, and everybody's like looking around. They got to find something to do because you can't be loafing because they're going to get in trouble, but it's communist, so nobody cares. So the workman there, where I was in Beijing, grabs his hammer off of his belt, drops on his knee, and starts hammering the dirt so he looks busy. That's a lot of work. Does that work bring joy? No, it's miserable. It's absolutely miserable. The kind of work that brings joy is the kind of work that helps others. And I'm not talking about some kind of goofy, altruistic, pie-in-the-sky communist, we're all going to give according to our ability so that Karl Marx can take according to his needs. I'm talking about the kind of work that defines value in a capitalist system where capitalism proves that you produced value with your work that is worthy of dignity because somebody else was willing to pay you to do it. Capitalism or market economies have a magic property that actually does raise all ships. It actually creates wealth, and it's actually pretty simple to understand how that works. You aren't taking wealth and redistributing it. That's socialism. That's equity. In capitalist systems, you make something that somebody else looks at and says, I'd be willing to part with this thing, maybe it's money, that I have in order to have that. And you say, well, I made this and I don't really need it that much, so maybe if I give it to you and you trade off some of that money that I could use to go buy more materials, then we'll both be better off. Maybe you grow wheat and you have all this wheat, but the baker says, man, if I had that wheat, I could make bread that would feed people and bring people happiness and allow them to sit around tables and come together and raise their spirits. But I need that wheat. And the farmer's sitting here and like, well, I ate all the wheat I can eat. I don't need this wheat. I wish somebody would buy it so I could buy a shirt or a new tool or a plow or a horse. And guess what? Both of these individuals can enter into a voluntary exchange where both of them at the end of the exchange perceive that they are better off. That's the definition of creating wealth. Both participants are better off. This is literally how you build prosperity. And there's dignity in doing the work that provides value that other people need because you know you're contributing. And you can look back at the end of the day and say, wow, I did a good job. And if you work for somebody else, maybe you can hear those magical words of, well done, my good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over these things. I'll make you master over many. And when you're master over many, you're the guy hiring 200 people to do whatever it happens to be, to build even more value for your prosperous society. So there's joy in that. There's tremendous joy in participating productively in a market economy, because a market economy is the aggregation of people looking to have their needs satisfied and to help other people satisfy those needs according to their ability. So there's joy there in true value-producing work. Not in going with a gun and robbing somebody and taking their money and saying that we're going to go give it to whoever else. I guess it's migrants or whatever word we're supposed to use now, right now. Then there's love. Oh God, James is going to talk about love. What's happening? Didn't they say mathematician? Is he allowed to talk about love? He's not going to do the Tim Waltz stance again. So there are a lot of different, I want to talk about love in a very general way. I'm not going to get into the weirdo eros side that Herbert Marcuse was obsessed with, you know, the lust and gratification part. I want to talk about, obviously, you guys are parents, right? And you love your kids. So the love of your kids is, I hear all the time, I know for myself, the greatest of joys in life. We heard Rob last night making the jokes, it's not easy. And it's not, but it's worth it because it brings a joy that's unparalleled in any other way. So how are we going to get out of this mess? Well, let's talk about it. Dignity of work, love your kids. That's a start. Loving your kids, of course, means that you'll sacrifice for your kids. There is really kind of no love without sacrifice. You're putting yourself out of the way for somebody else. And then there's, weirdly, joy in that. It's not all about you. There are things bigger and greater and more important than you. And it's challenging. You got kids, well, you got to go back to your Corinthians. You got to be like, well, love is patient, love is kind, not boastful, you know, the whole thing. But it also indicates that love does not engage in what is evil, but celebrates what is true. So there's love for truth. In fact, I'll expand that. I mean, obviously, Christians will understand that I'm saying there's love for God, but the true, the good, and the beautiful should be loved. And let me explain why. Because it's the same reason that you have love for your kids. On love for your kids, let me make a point. I want to make this point. I swear every time I talk to a Moms for Liberty chapter or crowd, and I always forget. Education, child welfare, is one of those issues that everybody cares about when they're thinking about it, and then they forget about it when they go to work on it. Every legislator, everybody forgets about it. It's low priority to most people in politics most of the time. Oh my God, the border. Oh my God, this. Oh my God, that. There's so many other things. The economy. You forget about the kids. Education is priority, or children's welfare is priority number one for parents, and that's why this movement's so important. That's why you're so important. Because the children really are the future. And when you love your kids, you're going to advocate for them, and you're going to make sure they become the future that we need, and that's going to not just be what we need as old people, but what they need to be able to flourish and continue to build a prosperous society. But if you want to do that, we heard it this morning, you've got to raise up your children the way that they should go, which means you're going to need to teach them not just the dignity of work, you're also going to have to teach them to love the truth, and to love the beautiful, and to love the good. That's what other way should you go? Where are you supposed to go? To the ugly and the evil? Hey, son, I want you to go into lying. You're just not going to say it, right? That's not what you want your children to do. The true, the good, and the beautiful are virtues, kind of transcendent virtues for a reason. So what happens when you love these things, these abstract things, right? Well, think about how it is when you love your children. You'll sacrifice for them. You'll risk for them. You'll put down your very last everything for them, dime, piece of food, whatever it is. Last bit of energy to the middle of the night to make sure they get their stupid science fair project they didn't tell you about until yesterday done. I forgot. Every time. 100% of the times. So when you love the truth, you're not just going to, we always say, tell the truth. You have to speak the truth. You have to have courage. You have to be brave. If you love the truth, you don't actually need courage that much to say it because you can't stop saying it. The gospel is supposed to be the truth. That's Christian belief. And what are you commanded to do? Proclaim it. And they say, James, you couldn't hide it if you were a Christian because you would proclaim the gospel all the time because of your transformed heart. You wouldn't be able to stop yourself because that's what love is. If you love the truth, you will proclaim the truth. You will seek the truth. You'll look for it where you didn't have it before. You'll do your own research, aka engage in misinformation and disinformation and get censored off the internet. You'll also defend other people who are seeking the truth. You'll support other people who are seeking the truth or trying to get the truth out there. You'll back them up. When people smear them or slander them or attack them or call them assholes with casseroles, you'll stand up for them, say, no, they're great. I'm getting the oh no finger. Communism. Is that my get out of jail free card? I have a sword, lady. You need to calm down. But by the way, that's called the use-mention gap. I was not using the word. I was mentioning the word. I was quoting the fake news media. What was it, evil incarnate that Sebastian Gorka called him? Okay, but that's true for the beautiful too. When you love the beautiful, you will seek to build beauty. You will seek to introduce beauty and culture to your children. You'll teach them to value things that are beautiful. You'll teach them, do we need some crazy environmentalist movement? No, if they value the beautiful, they're not leaving a can laying around on the ground at the park. They're not going to throw soup on the Mona Lisa to try to make a point. So if you love beauty, you will pursue beauty. You'll value beauty, and you'll teach your children to do the same. And you'll make a more beautiful world in the process. In the good. I already made that joke. Like, what are you doing if you're not pursuing the good, right? If you love the good, though, you don't have to sit and really think hard about what should I do today. More importantly, though, you're willing to take risks. Because you understand almost intuitively right and wrong when you come to love the good and study the, well, of course, if you love the good, you'll study the good, and you'll look for the good, and you'll proclaim the good, and you'll tap somebody on the shoulder when they're not doing the good and say, hey, by the way, you're not doing very good right now. and you'll understand the difference between right and wrong, and you'll be willing to take risks because it doesn't matter what trouble you get yourself into because you understand and love the good. You know you'll be able to make the right and wrong decisions that you need to make in order to get through it successfully. So you'll take productive risks in a way that you wouldn't otherwise. And these are all virtues, not just for us, not just necessary to raising our children, but also necessary to teach our children so they'll do the same in the next generation, and they'll do the same with their friends and spread that. The left is always worried, well, what about the kids who don't have great parents? Well, the kids who do have great parents are great influences on them. So make your kids one of those lights in the world. So if you love your kids and you love the truth and you love the good and you love the beautiful, you're already most of the way to joy. You're going to find beauty all over the place because you love it. You're going to find reasons to see good where you can find it and make good, and you're going to feel good about yourself, and you're going to have joy. If you love error, you're probably not going to have very much real joy. But if you love truth, as a mathematician, I can tell you there's a certain excitement about a really nice proof. It's exquisite. If you love truth, then you're going to do exactly these same things. So you're most of the way to joy. It's very joyful to actually be out proclaiming the truth. You feel like you're taking chains off when you stop caring that people are going to call you names or give you trouble. And it's very joyful. So you get joy and dignity of work. You teach your kids that there's joy and dignity of work. You get joy, or you open yourself to joy, particularly by pursuing and loving the true, the good, and the beautiful, which are absolutely crucial values to have. But there's also gratitude. Gratitude is probably the greatest source of joy. My wife is fantastic, let me tell you. Every time I'm grouchy, which P.S. is a lot. I don't know if you've seen what's going on the internet, but I live there, and it's not the best neighborhood. And she's so annoying. She'll be like, name something you're grateful for. And I'm like, you. And she's like, all right, good. Something else? She's like, that was the right answer. Name something else. And she'll make me do this, and every time it works. Every time I start to feel better. I'm really impressed. You know, I've listened to a lot of people from a lot of different faiths, and I listened to a Jewish man speaking some months ago, was talking about, I don't know this, and so for any Jews, I apologize if I mess this up, but there's apparently many Jews say a certain prayer before they even open their eyes in the morning, before they get out of bed, in gratitude for waking up. My wife naturally says one of the things that she does every day is that she shows gratitude. She says thank you to God or the universe or whatever it is for waking up again. And I'm like, why? It's morning. Can we do it in the afternoon? And she's like, no, first thing every day. And she's right. So these are hard times, right? Being grateful for the children and their health, to the opportunities that we have. You get to meet Rob Schneider at an event at Mamapalooza 2024, right? President Trump is speaking. We have these crazy opportunities. What a time we live in. But it's a lot of difficulty. You know, I ask all you people because I never know what I'm going to talk about. I'm like, what should I talk about? Hey, somebody give me a clue. And I keep hearing the same phrase, James, the moms are tired. Well, Alexander Solzhenitsyn said, at one point, I know you're tired, but those of you who haven't had communism come to your country yet, you don't understand. The communist, he's not tired because he has radical joy. He's manic. He's in religious ecstasy that he's going to flip your society over and humiliate you. Absolutely true. So if you have gratitude for the moment, you can actually overcome this exhaustion, this frustration. I'm working so hard, I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere. You can switch that around. And you can say, you know what? No, I'm grateful to have this opportunity. I'm grateful to live in this time. I'm grateful to be here for such a time as this. It's absolutely a reframe that you can do every single day, and you probably have to do it every single day. And luckily, Moms for Liberty adopted that particular verse as something that comes up, you know, it's part of the core mission of the organization. So what a wonderful opportunity to be grateful for there too. There's one last love I want to mention, and then I'll stop, which is the love for, I'm going to say liberty instead of freedom, but Alexander Solzhenitsyn, since I just mentioned him, who wrote the Gulag Archipelago, who understood the terrors of communism and Soviet Union, Alexander Solzhenitsyn at one point said, everything that's happened to us happened because we didn't love freedom enough. And because of that, we deserved everything we got. We have been blessed, and here's your gratitude too. We have been blessed with not just mostly peace in our time, but an incredible amount of freedom. Not just the freedom from our government where we can speak and worship and all these things as we please, freedom to own firearms, freedom from government persecution, which seems to all of these things are slipping or being threatened at least right now. We have also been blessed with freedom that comes only with opportunity. The technologies that we have created opportunities for us that we've never had, that we can connect across the internet, that I can talk to you at 6 in the morning or at midnight if you need to, is a tremendous opportunity. That you can pull out and fact check me for misinformation on every single thing I said right now on a device in your pocket is an incredible opportunity. That you can take your children to see things that most children in most times in history were never able to see, never even able to leave their county. If you live in the mountains, you're never seeing a beach. We have tremendous opportunity, and it's a result of, it's a gift of the freedoms that we have, and it's indicative of the freedom that we have. So we have to love freedom as well, enough to repel the evil. But there's a heavy weight that comes with that, because the proof of freedom is responsibility. People are only actually as free as the amount of responsibility they're willing to take for their lives. But we can be grateful for how free we are and for how much responsibility is put on us to be here, to change this world and save this country at such a time as this. So, thank you, joyful warriors. Let's make America great again.